A pregnant black woman, Naomi Carter, arrives alone for a scheduled checkup. But instead of care, she's met with cruel insults from a white doctor who mocks her as a discarded woman. Moments later, she's falsely accused of theft and dragged to security like a criminal. What the staff doesn't know is that her husband, Marcus Carter, calm, relentless, and dangerously powerful, is already on his way. And when he walks through that door, they will receive a lesson that will never be forgotten. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. It was a warm spring morning in Atlanta, the kind of morning where the air feels soft, sunlight filters gently through the trees, and the sidewalks hum with quiet movement. Mothers pushing strollers, retirees sipping coffee, life rolling forward without hurry. Eastbrook Women's Medical Center stood like a marble monument at the corner of Juniper and Pontolian, glass panels, polished stone, and the kind of silence that only money could buy. Inside, the air conditioning whispered over leather chairs and flower arrangements that looked too perfect to be real. Naomi Carter stood outside the main entrance, one hand resting over her round belly, the other gently tightening the strap of her worn tote bag. 6 months pregnant and glowing with maternal grace, she wore a soft blue maternity dress that hugged her figure just right, clean, simple, but far from designer. Her skin, a warm deep brown, contrasted beautifully with the morning light, but it also drew second glances from passing white couples who walked past the glass door without a greeting. One receptionist looked up from her desk, then back down, pretending not to see her. Naomi took a deep breath, the kind that masks anxiety with routine. "All right, baby," she whispered under her breath, rubbing her stomach gently. "Let's get this checkup done. Daddy will be here soon." Her voice was calm but tired, her eyes darting toward the time on her phone screen, 10:17. Marcus was supposed to meet her by 10:30. He had gotten called into the field that morning, some situation at the U.S. District Office, and promised he'd rush over, and she believed him. Marcus always kept his word. Still, there was a sting, a quiet one. This was supposed to be their first 4D scan, a milestone, a little glimpse at the tiny life inside her. And now she was walking into this place alone. The automatic doors hissed open as she stepped into the lobby. All sounds seemed to muffle beneath the weight of polished silence. The receptionist, a young blonde woman in her mid-20s, barely lifted her eyes. Naomi approached the desk slowly. "Good morning, Naomi Carter. I have a 10:30 with Dr. Albright," she said, her tone polite but firm, rehearsed from years of needing to prove she belonged in spaces like this. Her smile was warm, but her eyes scanned for any sign of warmth in return. The receptionist blinked, took in the name, then gave Naomi a look that lingered too long, not overtly rude, but laced with quiet judgment. She tapped on her keyboard, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're here for Dr. Albright?" she asked, as though the name had been said wrong. Naomi nodded, smile faltering. "Yes, scheduled 2 weeks ago, confirmed over the phone last night." "I see," the woman said before sliding a clipboard toward her with the practiced indifference of someone who thought they were doing a favor. "Please fill this out." As Naomi took the clipboard and sat down, she could feel that the air was thick with something unspoken. Women in designer handbags whispered across from her. One looked at Naomi, then at her own handbag, clutching it a little tighter. An older white man, possibly a husband, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, eyes avoiding hers entirely. She tried not to let it get to her. She tried to remind herself, this is about the baby. You're here for your child. But even as she filled out the forms with perfect penmanship, her fingers trembled slightly. Every second Marcus wasn't beside her, the more exposed she felt in a place like this. And somewhere behind one of those sleek doors, a storm was waiting. Naomi had barely finished the last page of the intake form when her name was called. The nurse didn't smile. She just stood there in pale scrubs, clipboard in hand, eyes glancing down and up like she was scanning luggage. Naomi rose slowly, pressing her palm against the small of her back, gathering her bag. She offered a small smile as she approached, but the nurse had already turned and started walking down the hallway. The hallway was clean, immaculate even. Soft music played in the background, probably meant to be soothing, but to Naomi, it felt like a mask over something rotten. Framed portraits of white mothers holding newborns lined the walls, and for a fleeting moment, she wondered if any woman who looked like her had ever been on those brochures. They stopped outside room 3B. The nurse pushed the door open and gestured her inside. "The doctor will be with you shortly," she said curtly, then shut the door before Naomi could even thank her. The room smelled of antiseptic and lavender. The examination bed was neatly arranged, a monitor in the corner blinking quietly. Naomi sat carefully on the edge, smoothing her dress, trying to quiet her nerves. She checked the time again, 10:43. Marcus was late. Just a few minutes, but each one felt like an hour. Then the door opened with a soft click, and in stepped Dr. Serena Albright. White coat, perfect posture, blonde hair swept into a tight bun, cold gray eyes. She didn't greet Naomi. She didn't offer a handshake. She didn't smile. She simply stared. There was a silence that lasted too long, so long that it stopped being professional and started feeling personal. Then, in a voice dipped in condescension, she said, "So you're Naomi Carter?" Naomi straightened her back, trying to match the tone without showing fear. "Yes, good morning. I believe we're doing the 4D scan today." Dr. Albright didn't move. Her eyes drifted down Naomi's body, not in the way a physician examines a patient, but in the way a critic judges a stranger's worth. "You came alone," she said flatly, as if it were an offense. Naomi hesitated. "My husband had an emergency at work. He's on his way." A smirk ghosted across the doctor's lips. "Of course," she murmured, then turned toward the counter, adjusting some papers with theatrical precision. Her tone shifted, cutting, sharp, and purposefully cruel. "Let me guess, you don't know who the father is, or maybe he decided this morning that he'd had enough of the responsibility." Typical. Naomi's breath caught. "Excuse me?" The doctor turned back to her, eyes narrowed. "Look, I don't know what kind of place you thought you were walking into, Ms. Carter. This isn't some public clinic. This is a specialized facility for expectant mothers who care about their health and their child's future, not women who show up unaccompanied looking like they rolled out of a bus station." Naomi stood up slowly, fists clenched at her sides. "I scheduled this appointment. I confirmed it. I came here respectfully." Dr. Albright stepped closer, her voice a low hiss. "You people are always respectful when you want something. Then you bring drama, disruption, and accusations. Not today. Not in my facility." Naomi's heart pounded so hard it felt like it echoed off the walls. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her voice shook, but she spoke with dignity. "I'm leaving. I don't have to sit here and be insulted." "Oh, you're not going anywhere just yet," the doctor sneered, turning toward the door. "In fact, I think I'm missing something." She glanced at the counter. "My watch. Cartier. Platinum band. I set it here this morning." Then she turned slowly, deliberately, eyes locking on Naomi. "And now it's gone." Naomi froze. "I'm saying I've had enough charity cases walk in here and walk out with more than they came in with," Dr. Albright snapped. "Security will be here shortly. Don't make this harder than it already is." Before Naomi could respond, the doctor was already gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Alone again, Naomi stared at the floor, disbelief mixing with a rising panic. She reached for her phone, but it was too late. Footsteps were already coming down the hall. The footsteps grew louder, measured, deliberate, like a verdict approaching. Naomi backed away from the door instinctively, her hand resting protectively over her belly. Two security officers stepped in, both male, both white, both wearing the same emotionless expression of institutional detachment. One was older, with a clipboard and a weary look. The other was younger, bulkier, chewing gum with slow, disdainful rhythm. They didn't ask permission. They didn't offer introductions. "Ms. Carter," the older one began, his tone clipped and rehearsed, "we've had a report of missing property. Dr. Albright has identified you as a person of interest." You'll need to come with us. Naomi's eyes widened. I haven't taken anything. This is a mistake. We'll sort that out downstairs, the younger one cut in, already stepping forward. You can explain yourself in the security office. Naomi didn't move. I'm pregnant, she said, her voice trembling. I don't feel safe being escorted like this. I'd like to speak to my husband. He's on his way. You'll have your chance, the older officer muttered, after we're done. She tried to hold her ground, but the pressure of their presence, looming, flanking her from both sides, left her with no room. She followed them silently through the back corridors of the clinic, corridors not meant for patients, past staff doors and locked cabinets. The air thick with bleach and bureaucracy. They reached a gray door with no label. The younger one opened it, revealing a small security room, dimly lit by a single, flickering fluorescent panel. A metal desk sat in the center, flanked by filing cabinets and a wall of outdated monitors showing grainy camera footage. Sit, the officer ordered. Naomi looked at the chair, cold, hard plastic, bolted to the floor, and hesitated. She sat slowly, adjusting her dress around her knees. Her hands rested on her belly, fingertips trembling. Please, she said quietly, I need to call my husband. Phone, the younger one barked. Now. She blinked. What? Hand it over. He reached forward. Naomi reluctantly pulled her phone from her bag and placed it on the desk. The officer snatched it up, turned it off, and slid it into a drawer with a thunk. We're holding it until this is resolved. Her voice cracked. You can't just take. You're not under arrest, the older one said with a practiced calm, but you are being detained for investigation. You'll have to cooperate. Her heart was pounding now, erratic and rising in her throat. Detained, she echoed. For what? Where's the proof I took anything? I didn't even go near her desk. We're not here to argue, the older man interrupted. We're here to verify the report. Once we're done, you can go. Naomi looked at both of them, at the walls that closed in, the absence of cameras inside the room, the flickering light above that buzzed like it had a grudge. This is wrong, she said softly, but with growing steel. I came here to take care of my baby. I've done nothing wrong. You don't get to lock me in a room and treat me like a criminal. The younger officer crossed his arms, lips curling into a slight sneer. Lady, save the performance. You want sympathy, you're in the wrong place. Her lip trembled, but she clenched her jaw, swallowing the scream she wanted to let out. Her body ached, her stomach tightened. The baby shifted inside her like it knew something was wrong. She inhaled through her nose, slow and steady, counting the breath as a shield against panic. The older officer scribbled something on a form. The younger one leaned against the wall, chewing gum louder now, like her discomfort was a joke to him. They weren't questioning her. They weren't searching. They were just keeping her, holding her, isolating her, because they could. Minutes crawled by. Naomi stared at the blank wall in front of her. She imagined Marcus walking through the front door of the clinic at that very moment, asking for her at the desk. She imagined the receptionist stalling, imagined the gears slowly turning in his mind, the way his eyes would narrow. And she imagined what would happen the moment he realized where she was. At the front desk of Eastbrook Women's Medical Center, Marcus Carter stepped through the glass doors with a measured pace, his polished black shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, the gold lapel pin of the Department of Justice gleaming just above his breast pocket. His frame was tall, composed, and still, radiating the kind of controlled intensity that came from years in federal service. His skin, a rich dark mahogany, contrasted sharply with the sterile brightness of the waiting room, drawing glances both cautious and calculating. But Marcus didn't glance back. His eyes were locked straight ahead. He approached the front desk, where the same young blonde receptionist looked up, her smile automatic until she met his eyes. Good morning. I'm looking for Naomi Carter, he said evenly, his voice deep and calm but laced with authority. She had a 10:30 appointment with Dr. Albright. I'm her husband. The receptionist blinked, her fingers frozen above the keyboard for half a beat too long. 1 moment, sir, let me check." Marcus's gaze didn't waver. "Please do." She tapped nervously, then squinted at the screen. "It says, she's currently not in the exam room." "Where is she?" The question came quiet, level, but something in his tone made her glance up sharply. "Security was notified about a situation. I'm not exactly sure what happened." "Dr. Albright." "What situation?" His voice was firmer now, still professional, still civil, but unmistakably commanding. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I think she's downstairs in the security office. There was a misunderstanding, I think." "Dr. Albright." "I need to see her now." Marcus leaned forward, just slightly, enough to convey that this was no longer a request. "Take me there, or call someone who will." The receptionist stood up, her face paling. "I'll get the floor manager." "No need." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a slim leather wallet, and opened it with practiced precision. Inside was a federal identification badge bearing the seal of the United States Department of Justice and his full title, Deputy Director, Office of Civil Rights Enforcement. The woman's breath hitched. He let the badge hang in her sight for exactly 3 seconds, then returned it to his pocket. "Where's the security office?" she stammered. "Down the corridor, past the staff elevators, first door on the left." Without another word, Marcus turned and walked. His strides were sharp, unwavering, like he'd walked these corridors 100 times before. His fingers curled tightly as they swung by his side. He didn't rush, but the tension in his shoulders made clear, someone was about to learn they had made the gravest of assumptions. Down the sterile hallway, through a nondescript door, and into the underbelly of the facility he arrived. A metallic door stood ahead, slightly ajar, voices muffled behind it. He pushed it open. Inside, Naomi sat rigid in a chair, her hands resting on her belly, her expression a mix of fear and fury held behind trembling restraint. 2 officers stood nearby, startled at the intrusion. The younger one straightened up, gum still stuck between his teeth. The older one's eyes narrowed. "Can we help you?" Marcus stepped fully into the room. "Yes," he said, his tone didn't rise, it didn't need to. "You can help me by standing down and explaining in detail why you have illegally detained my wife without due cause, without counsel, and without access to her personal property." The officers froze. Naomi's head snapped toward him, a gasp escaping her lips. "Marcus." He moved to her side, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "I'm here. It's over now." And he turned back to the guards, his voice suddenly still. "I want the name of the individual who ordered this detainment, the report that authorized it, and access to every minute of surveillance footage involving my wife immediately." The young officer took a step back. The older one hesitated. "This isn't. Look, we were just following protocol." "You're not trained in constitutional law." "I am," Marcus interrupted coolly. "And you've violated several. Now get me the footage before I call the state attorney general." The room went silent. Naomi closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek, not from weakness, but from the sheer breathtaking relief of being seen. The air in the security room turned brittle. No one moved. The hum of the overhead fluorescent light sounded louder, sharper, as if even the electricity sensed the shift. Marcus stood tall, steady, his presence like a silent storm waiting to break. Naomi sat behind him, watching with wide eyes, her fear now tempered by awe. He hadn't raised his voice, but the force in his words had sent a chill through the room, stronger than any threat. The younger guard, now visibly uncomfortable, cleared his throat and muttered, "We didn't mean anything by it. It was just a precaution." Marcus didn't even glance at him. "So your version of precaution includes detaining a pregnant woman without evidence, denying her access to communication, and confiscating her property? That's not precaution, that's negligence and unlawful restraint." The older officer, more experienced but clearly rattled, tried to salvage the moment. "Sir, Dr. Albright reported a missing item and identified her as the last patient in the room. We were following protocol. "Show me the footage," Marcus said sharply, "right now." The officer hesitated. "We're not authorized to." "You are now," Marcus said, producing his credentials again and holding them steady in the air. "I'm invoking immediate oversight under federal civil protection. If you delay one more minute, this becomes obstruction." The room shifted. The weight of authority settled, not on their uniforms, but on the federal badge Marcus held like a scalpel. The older officer nodded stiffly, turned to the wall console, and began cueing the security footage. As he tapped nervously, the monitors flickered, hallway feeds, waiting rooms, and finally the angle outside the exam room Naomi had visited. The timestamp read 10:41 a.m. The footage played. Naomi walked in, alone, calm, polite. She never touched anything but the doorknob and the seat. She never went near the counter. Then, 10:52 a.m., Dr. Albright exited, glancing at the empty tray, touching her wrist, then marching out with growing agitation. "There," Marcus pointed. "Freeze it. Zoom in on that tray." The officer complied. The image sharpened. A gleaming silver watch, Cartier, resting near the tissue box. "She left it behind," Naomi whispered, her voice trembled not in fear but in disbelief. "Roll forward," Marcus instructed. The image skipped ahead. At 10:54 a.m., a cleaning attendant entered briefly, untouched the tray, then left. 10:59 a.m., the watch was still there. And then the camera cut out. Marcus turned sharply. "Where's the rest?" That's when the cleaning crew shifts over. "There's a blind spot in the handoff," the officer admitted, sweat beading at his temples. "Convenient," Marcus murmured, his voice a blade wrapped in silk. He turned toward the drawer and pulled it open, retrieving Naomi's phone. He handed it back to her gently, then addressed the guards again. "Detaining my wife without due process is a civil rights violation. Denying her medical autonomy while pregnant borders on reckless endangerment. I'm filing formal complaints with the DOJ, and a public incident report will be submitted to the licensing board before the day ends. I suggest you prepare statements." Neither officer responded. The weight of federal retaliation hung in the room like thunderclouds. Naomi's hands clutched the phone like it was life itself. She rose slowly, still shaky but taller now, lifted by the protection she hadn't been afforded until that moment. "I want to go upstairs," she said softly. "I want to see that doctor again." Marcus nodded once. "Let's go." The elevator doors opened to the top floor of Eastbrook Medical, and for the first time that morning, every eye in the hallway turned and held its stare. Not because Naomi stood there, but because of who now walked beside her. Marcus Carter's steps were measured, but his presence cut through the sterile calm like a warning bell. Naomi walked slightly behind him, no longer shaken but centered, her chin lifted, her stride unbroken. Her pain had been folded into something stronger, purpose. A uniformed administrator waited outside the glass conference room, visibly tense. "Mr. Carter and Mrs. Carter," he stammered. "Dr. Albright is inside. We've convened the Internal Ethics Board for immediate review." Marcus nodded. "Let's get started." Inside, a long glass table stretched beneath bright overhead lights. 3 board members sat at one end, 2 men, 1 woman, all white, all visibly unsettled. Dr. Serena Albright sat at the far side, lips pursed, arms crossed, her posture still proud but with tension around the eyes that betrayed her confidence. Naomi took the seat opposite her. Marcus remained standing, his badge visible. No one spoke at first. Then the board chair cleared his throat. "We've reviewed preliminary footage, Mr. Carter. We understand you wish to file formal action." Marcus placed a thin stack of papers on the table, typed, signed, time-stamped. "My wife was falsely accused of theft, illegally detained, denied access to communication, and humiliated in a medical facility while under your care. We have footage proving the alleged theft never occurred. We also have audio recordings of degrading, racially charged comments made by your attending physician." Dr. Albright scoffed. "This is absurd. I followed protocol. I had every reason to suspect." "You had every reason to assume," Marcus cut in coldly, "based solely on her appearance. Not her behavior. Not the facts. Just the color of her skin. In the absence of a man by her side." Naomi turned then, her voice clear and deliberate. "You looked at me and saw something disposable. You didn't see a teacher, a wife, a mother-to-be. You didn't even see a person. You saw a problem. You humiliated me for walking into a space I had every right to be in." Dr. Albright's eyes narrowed. "That's not how it happened." Naomi's voice did not rise. "It didn't need to. You told me I was probably abandoned, that I looked like I came from a bus station. You called me a thief before you ever spoke to me like a human being." Silence fell again. The board members exchanged looks. One of them shifted uncomfortably. Marcus stepped forward. "Dr. Albright's actions aren't just unethical, they're actionable. We're pursuing this through federal civil rights litigation. But more than that, we're asking for transparency, a written public apology, institutional reform, mandatory anti-bias training, and her immediate suspension." The board chair's voice cracked slightly as he replied, "We will begin proceedings immediately." As the meeting adjourned, Dr. Albright stood quickly, knocking her chair slightly off balance, and stormed out without a word. No one stopped her. No one followed. Later that week, the clinic released a formal statement acknowledging the incident. Dr. Serena Albright was placed on indefinite administrative leave. A full review of patient rights procedures was initiated. And Naomi? She received more than just an apology, she received vindication. But she didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, Naomi stood at a podium outside the same clinic, flanked by her husband and local civil rights advocates. Reporters gathered, microphones pointed forward. She spoke calmly but with purpose. "This isn't just about me. It's about every black woman who walks into a room and is assumed to be less. It's about the systems that let that assumption go unchecked. And it's about saying loudly that we deserve better. We will not be quiet. We will not be afraid. We will not disappear just to make you comfortable." The crowd applauded, not with noise, but with weight, a silent thunder of agreement. Marcus stood beside her, pride etched into every line of his face. And as the sun broke through the clouds overhead, Naomi looked down at her belly, at the life growing inside her, and smiled for the first time that week. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had finally started to change. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.